Open our Bibles to the book of Proverbs. All right. Well, we are concluding our series, Me and My Emojis. As we've been talking over the last 2 months, kind of sporadically, we've had some guest speakers here and there, but we've covered a few things. We talked about the elephant in the room and our hearts and the inner life and how important it is then to gain some wisdom on how to navigate those emotions. We've also talked about finding freedom from anxiety. We've talked about discovering the full effect of joy, and we've also talked about not to run away from sadness. The one glaring omission is an emotion that's pretty central to who we are, whether we want to admit it or not, and that is the emotion of anger. How many of you guys, just show of hands, have gotten angry at some point in your life? Because if you haven't, I would like you to just swap places with me and teach me how. How, especially if you've raised kids or you've been around kids. Wow, do they know how to raise the temperature of our anger? So we're going to talk about putting the brakes on anger. Now, in the last year, I've had to work on my truck and installing brake lines. Well, to be fair, I didn't actually install them myself. I had some help. Dan Olson helped me, and we started with the left side, and we changed the brake line, and then a couple months later, we had to do the right side. And actually, would be lying if I really did a lot of the work. I kind of assisted him. He knew it. He knew what he was doing, and I'd probably just make a mess. But I realized it's kind of important to have brakes, and we kind of take it for granted that they just work every time. And so I want to ask you a question: how do you know when you need new brake lines? For you guys that have had that experience, you can feel that palpable sensation in your foot when the pressure goes out. And all of a sudden you realize, oh my goodness, I'm driving and my brakes are not like they need to be. You can still brake, it's just as much slower. You realize that there just isn't pressure there to provide resistance. And that's happened to me twice, and I knew who to call for help. Now recently my truck has been making noises, and they've gotten increasingly worse. So if you've seen me drive my truck, it's kind of a rusty, tender love, needs a lot of love and attention. But it's made a lot of noises, so I don't like to drive it a lot, but it's been making these noises, and Ashley's like, hey, that sounds a lot like the brakes. I'm like, honey, we've changed the brakes. She's like, what? She's like, well, it sounds a lot like it was on our car. Did I mention that in the last year I've had to change my car's brakes too? Now, I didn't do it. I had somebody else do that. But, I mean, I don't know what it is with the pastor's brakes, but something's going on. So I've learned in my life that God often uses my circumstances to teach me, to bring my attention to something he wants to show me. And so it's taken a while, but I've realized brakes are kind of important. We need them. We need not just physical brakes on vehicles, but we need emotional brakes. We need to be able to slow down. Now, what keeps me from, let's say, make a severe example here, but what keeps me from maybe breaking my kids' necks when they're roughhousing with their little sister who can't defend herself? Well, what keeps me from going to the ER visit is emotional breaks. It's for me to be like, okay, let's fix this problem, but not in a way that your instincts are like just to throw them against the wall and all those things. Thankfully, I have not done that, and I don't plan on doing that. But anger, that feeling of it, it's just like you want to act, you want to stop it now. And so we need to talk about these breaks, these emotional breaks. Now, the Bible talks a lot about anger, and many of the characters in the Bible dealt with anger. Even Jesus experienced anger. Now, pastor and author Tim Keller, he's written a lot and spoke a lot, and one of the things he's dealt with is how to heal from anger. And he's got a book here. It's a devotional, which it's actually really, really insightful because he's got just a lot of things from the book of Proverbs, and I'm going to be pulling out some of these thoughts that he has. So I want to make sure I give him full credit, and also if you want to go deeper and you like what we've talked about today, I want to make sure you know where to go for that resource. He's a really excellent pastor and teacher. Now, we're going to be talking from the book of Proverbs, and it's got a lot to say on gaining some wisdom on anger. So I'm going to read these, and the references will be on the screen. You can jot these down if you want to look at them later, and I'm going to be addressing them in later points too. But I want to just kind of read them in all of them that we're going to use. So we're going to start here with Proverbs 14. It says, "A patient man has great understanding, but a quick-tempered man displays folly. A tranquil heart is life to the body, but passion is rottenness to the bones. A gentle answer turns away wrath, but a harsh word stirs up anger. A hot-tempered man stirs up dissension, but a patient man calms a quarrel. He who is slow to anger is better than the mighty, and he who rules his spirit than he who captures a city. A man's wisdom gives him patience. It is to his glory to overlook an offense. A hot-tempered man must pay the penalty. If you rescue him, you will have to do it again. Do not testify against your neighbor without cause, or use your lips to deceive. Do not say, 'I'll do to him as he's done to me. I'll pay that man back for what he did.' If your enemy is hungry, give him food to eat. If he's thirsty, give him water to drink. In doing this, you will heap burning coals on his head, and the Lord will reward you." Now, as we begin, I want to ask a question. What is wisdom? How do you know when you have it? Well, what is wisdom? Well, in 1 Kings chapter 3, there's a man named Solomon. He's known in the Bible for asking to know what the difference is between what is right and what is wrong. We call this wisdom. Well, wisdom is actually knowing what's right and wrong and what action to take in most situations where rules are not clear. If they were clear, you probably wouldn't need wisdom. You just need sense. You just need to be able to do whatever has been said, or you need understanding. Wisdom's like when there are no rules and it hasn't been clearly stated, wisdom's knowing what to do, what the right course is to take. Now, you will not become a wise person until you learn how to handle anger in yourself and others. So this is a message that you don't just learn once. You need to learn over a lifetime in dealing with people, raising children, all that stuff. It is a developing trait. And what I'm going to be talking about today isn't so much the trait. It's like the state of anger. When you get emotional, it's a state. I'm not even really talking a whole lot about that, just being an angry person, because I think a lot of us deal with the state of being angry. So I'm going to give you guys 4 things you must know about anger to be wise. I'm going to give you all up front. Number 1 is the dangerous power of anger. Number 2, the basic goodness of anger. Number 3, why anger goes wrong. And number 4, how it can be healed. So hopefully by the end, we'll have an aha moment and be transformed. Now, first is the dangerous power of anger. Timothy Keller, he says this. He says, "Anger is the dynamite of the human soul. It can disintegrate and destroy." It reminds me of the X-Men character, the hero, Cyclops, who has the glasses. What happens when he lifts up those glasses? The lasers just shoot out and disintegrate whatever's in front of him, so he has these protective glasses on. Well, I think of Cyclops when I think of this, the power, the dynamite of anger. It can destroy. Now, what does it destroy? Well, first of all, it destroys your body. As we read in verse 30, its passion is rottenness to the bones, meaning those feelings, those emotions, they don't just happen. They kind of get held here and they begin to take action against the body. Now, it's been medically shown, you could say proven, that anger is far worse on your body than any other emotion. It leads to heart disease and all kinds of physical ailments. At least it does not help, it hinders. So it can destroy the body. Secondly, it destroys community. It ruins the good vibes between people. Verse 18 talks about that. A hot-tempered man stirs up dissension. Now, when you get angry, you throw words around, like weapons, and you start to talk not from your mind, but like being mindless, and you're just saying stuff because you feel it so strongly and passionately. And we all know that words have enormous power. They can bring up, they can give life, or they can kill, and they can destroy. And so it can destroy community. Third, it can destroy your wisdom. All that you've gained and knowing the right course to take, well, it can kind of hamper all of that. And so we have to be wise about this. See, a patient man has great understanding, but a quick-tempered man displays folly. I mean, if you've ever said something foolish in anger, you kind of wake up and you're like, oh, what was I thinking? I looked so foolish. Well, you probably did look foolish, and that's part of it. But after you cool off, you kind of realize, I probably shouldn't have said that, or maybe I overreacted. And if you're wise, you'll go back and try to make it right away. But when you're angry, you got to be careful because your foolishness can start to show up in your decisions. The last thing is that it destroys your will. And what I mean by that is your ability to choose. Now you say, well, you always have an ability to choose. Have you ever met a very angry man or a very angry woman? They kind of lose control. That's part of the rage that anger can lead you into, is you had control, you had choice, but where did it go? Well, it got disintegrated because of this power, dangerous power of anger. Now, we see this in the next one, that if you rescue him, you'll have to do it again. So of all the emotions, anger is the one that looks the most like an addictive substance. You've ever known an addict, whether it's through a drug substance, prescription drugs, or alcohol. What do they say when you confront them on their use? I'm not an alcoholic. Whoa, I don't have a drug problem. Prescription drugs, I just take those to go to sleep. I just like to have a little here, a little there. Well, when people are coming to you and saying it's a problem. Maybe not to you, but to everybody else around you, it is becoming a problem. But the thing about addiction is that it leads to this state of denial. You deny that there is a problem. You deny that it is even there. And emotions like anger look a lot like that because you don't think that you really have a problem with it. But others will say you do. Denial leads to more anger, more problems, and therefore even further anger to remain in denial about it. If you've ever confronted somebody, they're like, I don't have a problem. All of a sudden, more angry about it. You almost don't even want to say it, but that's just what it looks like. It destroys your will, and all of a sudden, you don't really have control of it. It takes control of you. So that's the dangerous power of anger. But on the flip side of that, have you ever thought about this? The basic goodness of anger, it's an emotion that God has created, and it's in the human system for a reason. It's actually, we're made in the image of God, and so we have to look to God and say, does God get angry? And is that bad? Well, the good kind of anger that the Bible talks about is slow anger. This might help you to actually say this out loud. So if you have somebody next to you, or you can say this to yourself, you got to say it slowly, like you're from Oklahoma, because I'm from Kansas. We talk slow, but they talk slower. From Oklahoma. Anybody there? Anybody get there? Or Indiana? You guys from Indiana? Okay, Indiana talks like that too. This is the Hoosier state. So you got to say this to somebody next to you. Say, slow anger. Slow anger. Pump the brakes. Slow. It's the good kind of anger. It's what the Bible reinforces that we should have. Proverbs 16:32 says, he who is slow to anger is better than the mighty, and he who rules his spirit than he who captures a city. The idea is slow anger, not no anger or blow up anger, but to slow it down. Now, Tim Keller, he states this, that it is a sin to never get angry. and it is a sin to blow up in your anger. Now, I saw that. I'm like, whoa, 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 whoa. It's a sin to never get angry? Well, he explains it this way. In Ephesians 4:26, we've read that in your anger, do not sin. Do not let the sun go down on your anger or in your anger. We've all kind of heard something like that, do not sin. But what it's saying here, that Paul is saying, he's saying, be angry, but sin not. And it's an imperative. It's something you should do. Not you will be angry, but you should be angry sometimes. John Christensen, he was an early preacher in America. He said this. He said, he that is angry without cause sins. He that is not angry when there is cause sins. For unreasonable patience is the hotbed of many vices. It's basically like, should you be patient indefinitely? Should you forgive indefinitely? Should you love indefinitely? Well, we all say yes, yes, yes. But the Bible also says there is a point where anger is good, and anger is the right response. Slow anger, if you think about this, is an attribute of God. It's how God describes himself. He does this in both Psalms 103, verse 8. It says, the Lord is merciful and gracious, slow to anger, and abounding in steadfast love. And in Exodus 34:6, the most famous example is when Moses is saying, show me your glory. And God responds to him, I will declare my name to you, or for you. I am the Lord, a God of merciful and gracious, slow to anger, and abounding in steadfast love and faithfulness. So this is the way God describes himself, as slow to anger. Now, many of us may have an issue here because we think, I believe in a God of love. I mean, not a God who gets angry. Well, it's not up to you to define God. God defines himself through God's word, so we have to listen up when God describes who he is, and we have to deal with it. That's our problem. If we're like, hey, I don't like the way you revealed yourself, God. But that's how God has revealed himself, so we need to pay attention. What is he showing us? Because he's a mirror. We're a mirror to him. We're made in the image of God. So if you never get angry about anything, I would say this, that you don't love anything. Because if you've ever loved something, then you've experienced anger. Anger is a love response to a threat to the object of your love. You love something, you see a threat, anger is the correct response. Now, this anger is love in motion to deal with a threat toward that which you really love, to disintegrate it if possible. Now, I know this is kind of out there, but this actually came up yesterday as I was talking with Cole and Ashley's cousin, who's 11 years old. So he's the same age as Cole. And we were saying something, and it's like, well, you have to be a man to understand that. I said something like that, and he's like, Cole's like, I'm a man. I'm like, no, you're not. You're a boy. And they're like, then we got to discussing what a man is. And I was like, using some poor examples. And I was like, well, a man is somebody who's going to rip a lion apart if their family is being threatened. And Cole so literally says, Dad, you would die. I was like, well, thanks, son. But a part of being a man is that even though you are going to die, you're going to try like mad to either rip that lion apart or be devoured and maybe give some time for your kids to get away. I'm not saying that that's something that I would even think about. Well, should I do this or not? Running away is not an option because it's in me to die if that's what is needed. And so describing what a man is also, a woman I'm sure would, I'm not saying a woman wouldn't do that, but there's a courage, there's a love, there's an anger that would rise up to destroy the threat if that was ever between me and my kid. So that's something God has given us. And so if I didn't do anything and a lion was attacking my family, would I be sinning? I would say yeah. I would say it'd be sinful to just do nothing. It would be the correct response to get angry. And some of you guys are like, wow, this is really powerful right now. But there's not a lion around here. Cole had to remind himself that there are no lions around here. I was like, they're in zoos, they're in cages, or they're roaming the safari in Africa. But God gets angry. And if you really want to see what's in your heart, And you just see what you're defending. What are the threats that when they're coming at it, anger rises up and you want to do something about it? Because that'll tell you what you love is what you're defending. And God, although he is slow to anger, he does get angry. We shouldn't kid ourselves about that. Romans 1, for example, is a whole chapter explaining that God is angry. Okay? Paul begins his epistle by reminding the readers of God's anger, saying, the wrath of God, in verse 18, is being revealed from heaven against all the godlessness and wickedness of people. Now, this is the same God who John writes in his gospel in chapter 3, verse 16, who says, for God has so loved the world that he gave his one and only Son, that whoever believes in him shall not perish, but have eternal life. So what does this reveal about God? Well, it says that God's anger flows from his love. God's anger is not directed at people, but at sin, because it is a threat to the object of his love, which is people. Jesus revealed a lot what God was like when he was here on earth. And Jesus got angry in the Gospels. We see at least 3 examples that I can point to. And that's Jesus. Remember, he didn't sin, and he was angry at the money changers. Remember when he went in the temple? He turned over the tables. He got whips. He was chasing people. He was angry. If you say he wasn't angry, I don't know what you mean by anger, because anger looks like that. And he was also angry at the religious leaders. He used that with his words. He said, you're like whitewashed tombs. Okay, he said some pretty pointed stuff towards those that were a threat to the object of his love. And he wasn't mad at the people. He was mad at what they were saying, the teachings that were getting in people's heads that was keeping them from who God was. And he was also angry at the tomb of Lazarus. He was mad at death and what it does to the people that he loves. That was the reason why he wept, why he had tremendous sadness. There was anger in his sadness because of what sin, that threat to the object of his love. Are you guys following me with that? Now, we live in a culture that's kind of confused about anger. You have some that believe you should express your anger on Facebook posts, and you should get angry, express it, kick something, punch something, let it out. And, kind of get it out of your system. Because if you get angry, you'll get it out of your system. Or you'll just be more angry the next time. Now, while others see anger as something you should repress and just get over it. That's kind of your problem. Just get over it. Don't let it out. So you kind of got this express it or repress it kind of thing going. And really the biblical approach sees both the basic goodness of anger and the danger and the dangerous power of anger. So it holds both those in tension to know what is wise in those situations. Number 3 is why anger goes wrong. There's a lot of theories out there, but one of the ones I think that is most, that rises to the surface is St. Augustine's kind of argument. And he used the term disordered love. Disordered love, meaning it's gone wrong. And he answers this question, why anger goes wrong. He says this. He says, we turn good things into ultimate things. Instead of loving them, we look to them for ultimate comfort only God can give. Now, we could kind of break that down a little further, maybe with an example. If you love somebody romantically, there's appropriate love for that person. But then, according to St. Augustine, there's disordered love that basically turns the need for the other person into an absolute necessity. Means if I break up with this person, life's not worth living anymore. And when you're saying that, you're pointing to a disordered love. Because should that person take the top priority in your life? No, they shouldn't sit on God's throne. Nobody should sit on God's throne, and idolatry or idol worship is putting something in God's place. It's disordered love. Now, disordered love creates disordered anger because, remember, anger follows love. So if you have disordered love, disordered anger is going to accompany it. And it's disordered in a couple ways. First, it's disordered in its causes. We are angry for ourselves, like over the slights that people give us. Oh, they didn't invite me to their party. Or, man, they didn't befriend me or whatever. There's just, oh, it's a slight. And we get so upset about that when other side of the world, somebody's dying, there's oppression going on and all that stuff. We don't nearly get the anger. It doesn't rise to the level over those slights. And so we have kind of a disordered in its causes. The things we should be angry about, we're not. And the things we should not be angry about, we are. And so it's disordered in its causes. Next is disordered in its proportions. You ever had somebody say you're overreacting? Even when they say that, makes you want to overreact. You want to see angry? You want to see me overreact? But anger, it gets disordered in its proportions. Because you love something so much, you tend to get angry about it. And our anger is usually uncontrollable at that point, and we kind of flip out. And if we really just calm ourselves down, we realize it was out of proportion. I should not have reacted so strongly to that. And then last, it's disordered in its goal. Ordered, loving anger seeks to do like a surgical strike. It's precision. You hit the target you're meaning to hit against the anger. It's like a parent. Let's say your kid does something silly or foolish. Well, you don't blast the kid to the moon. No, you go after the behavior. You target your anger towards eradicating that behavior, and it's not the child who gets caught into that. So loving anger goes after the problem, not the person. And so when you have disordered love, you forget the goal, and you basically personalize everything. You start getting mad at the person. You start criticizing who they are. You always do this. You never do this. And it becomes way, way, way destructive because you forget the goal. It's really you're mad at the thing they did, the action they did. It's not just the person that needs to be changed. Now with this, I think when we talk about anger, I have a cup, but you guys can't see through this cup. And let me see. There is stuff in the cup. Hold on. I have a whole sermon called "Bump My Cup," but I'm not gonna share it right now. But the simple illustration I use is when somebody actually comes up and bumps me, and I have my cup, and something spills on them. Well, I get mad at the person for bumping my cup, but I don't actually think about the fact that I have stuff in my cup, and that's probably why something spilled out. And it's about checking what's inside. And I would say with anger, your heart gets filled up and doesn't immediately lash out on everybody, or else we'd have a bunch of crazy people out there. No, it builds, okay? So many of us just experience level 1 anger, which level 1 anger is like those things, those frustrations that make us angry every day. Somebody cutting you off in traffic, somebody shooting the deer you wanted to shoot, or Walmart, somebody goes in the lane, their shopping cart, and they have like a million things, and it says 15 items. Somebody doesn't follow the rules. Those are the things that get us frustrated. Now, we get angry, it's level 1, it kind of fills us up, but it's not enough to cause mayhem, unless somebody bumps our cup, of course, and then we do get frustrated at them. But you have level 1. Level 2 is those things that we haven't been able to forget or forgive. It's like it happened yesterday. It's like you haven't consciously been like, you know what, I forgive what they did, and that's between them and God. It's like you still hold on to it. And even though you may be in a different room, you're not thinking about it, as soon as that person comes into the room, level 2, anger just rises up. And it's almost like you don't recognize it, but it's there. You start getting you're heated, your heart starts pounding a little faster. You're ready to pounce on that threat. And I'm probably saying this at the right time, because Thanksgiving, you probably were around some of those people, and you were reminded of some things they did, and you were a little bit more testy than you should have been, right? So that's level 2. Level 3 is like full-blown, watch out, and that is when things we've decided we need instead of God. It's those idols, the things that we need instead of God. So what happens if you lose those things? You flip out. You can't handle that. And you put whatever you want in that. I don't know what it is for you, but wow, do those get people very, very, very excited. It gets me excited. But you can also have good things in there. We can make idols out of anything. We take the good and we make it ultimate. So we can take things like family. Now, if somebody comes after our family in some way, some slight, That's level 3 if we're not careful, because we put the family above God. Same thing with our job and some other things that we think are good. If you lose your job, all of a sudden, because what you'll realize with that anger, level 3, is that because of that loss, you feel entitled. You feel entitled, and ultimately you bring that to God, and it's the pity party, the self-pity where, and if you've been there, you're so down on yourself, you're like, man, why is everybody get this and I don't have this? And ultimately it's just you and God, and God's up there saying, like, I gave you everything. I gave you my son. You have it all. And he's trying to remind us that he can only take that place, that need. And as long as we think other people hold the keys to our happiness, all of a sudden at level 3, we are volatile and we can have some problems. All right, is anybody getting anything out of this, or am I just talking to myself? Okay, I see some nodding, some heads, so it's like I could sit on this for a while. All right, so that's why anger goes wrong. There's some things that build up, some disorderness going on. Now, how do we heal this? How do we heal anger? Because surely we can't just stay like this for the rest of our life. Well, I got a couple points that I think will help. Number 1 is to admit you're angry. I know, you have to admit it. That means getting in touch with the reality of it, that you've lost something and you're angry about it. Or somebody has threatened the object of your love and you're angry about it. So you must own it and admit it. Say, yeah, that hurt. That person did something that was wrong. I don't like that. And you need to hold it. It's a lot like Jesus when the woman was caught in adultery and kind of made public, and they got this crowd of angry men around this woman, and they're ready to stone her because that's what Moses' law says to do, right, Jesus? And we need to follow everything he says, right, Jesus? So they bring this to Jesus saying, you be the judge. And what does Jesus do? For you guys that have read this story, what does he do? He says, okay, he who has no sin, cast the first stone. Why would he say that? Because he knows all of them have sinned. And one by one, they dropped their stones of anger. And he says to the woman, go, or he says, neither do I condemn you, go and sin no more. Jesus chooses to love this woman who doesn't deserve it. She's done a lot of wrong, to make a point to this crowd that their anger is not justified because they themselves deserve the response of God of anger. Now, people commonly will say that, well, you deserve my anger, but I'm not angry. Now, if you've had a spouse or somebody close to you, brother, sister, they'll say, I'm not angry. I know I should be angry, but I'm not angry. And the way that they say it just doesn't sound right. It sounds like you're still angry. But what they're really saying is, you deserve anger, and I'm above you. I'm up here, you're down there. I'm a bigger person than you. And even all of this, for some of us, is like, well, yeah, I am a bigger person. They did wrong. Well, anger can kind of put you in a position where you're prideful about it. And instead of coming down to their level and reconciling, you can never reconcile because you're up here and they're down here. And here's the deal. Even owning up to your anger and admitting it, I mean, you have to admit some vulnerability and weakness. You have to allow yourself to possibly get hurt again, that they may not like that. But the refusal to do this only hinders that relationship. You can't reconcile. You can't make things right. You can't do that because you're refusing to even admit that you have some anger towards that person. It's when that, and it all of a sudden goes from maybe a level 1 that they did something that's frustrating to you, but you kind of take it more personal because you love, they're attacking something you love, and all of a sudden it gets to level 2, and you can't quite get over it. Can't forget it, you can't forgive it. And this is where Hebrews 12:15 gives a great picture. He says this, see to it that no root of bitterness springs up and causes trouble. Root of bitterness. Now, roots, I don't know a whole lot about trees or roots, but I did a whole series on trees, and I did not talk about the root of bitterness. So I'm going to do that here. At the parsonage, we had a tree cut down because some of it was dead, but it was kind of an accident. Like, we weren't going to cut that one right away, but I kind of pointed to the wrong tree, and that one got cut down, which is fine. it needed to come down. But it had some dead wood, and it was like there was a fear of it falling on children, and so it needed to come down. But soon, the next season, there's these sprouts that started kind of getting up, and it was kind of getting like too soon. And at first I was like, well, I'll just cut a little bit here. But it got so many. There was like 12 of them that shot up from the stump. And then we were just like, well, it's not like we needed to cut down that tree because the tree was a problem. So we just let it grow. And like another season went by, and this thing is massive. I mean, it's like huge. And there's 12 of them. So I don't know what that's going to look like in the future, if there's going to be 12 separate trees. But it shows a great picture that you cut down the stump, if you don't deal with the root, you get a whole lot of unexpected consequences. And you see, roots become shoots, which become trees, which, if you're not careful, become forests. And there's all of a sudden, your anger is utterly out of control. And so the Bible talks about this root of bitterness. See to it, meaning observe, get to it, because this is going to manifest and have some unintended consequences. Second thing that I think you can do to help heal this anger, once you've admitted it, and you're like, I do have anger, is to analyze your anger. You don't like that word? Think about your thinking is another way you could say it. Think about your thinking. You see this in the Proverbs here. It says, do not say, I'll do to him as he has done to me. I'll pay back that man for what he did. You wouldn't say this to somebody, I'm going to pay you back. No, you think this. It's a self-talk. You're thinking about this. So it's in analyzing, you're thinking about your thinking of your anger. What are the things you're saying to yourself about this situation that you're angry about? Because anger is not so much about the gravity of what you've lost, but it's also about how you talk to yourself about it. How do you explain this to yourself? Because that's a lot of the problem. Jeremiah 45, verse 5, he says this. He says, and do you seek great things for yourself? Seek them not. He's saying those things, even though they're great things, you can go after them. You got to be cognizant of what God's plan is. To see what is God doing in this situation. And the wise thing is to not seek them yourself, to humble yourself and to not go down that path. We must question what is so important to us that we get angry. And I believe that this question, if we answer that, it will reveal our idols. We'll say, I feel like I'm so angry and it's justified because I really, really, really think that my reputation will get tarnished if this happens. And all of a sudden your reputation becomes the idol. Or you think that respect or whatever, respect or reputation, you can all of a sudden begin to talk yourself into more anger, and that's the response that you need to take. We need to ask ourselves, why are we pursuing those things? And we think they're so great. Because the Bible is saying, don't seek them. Don't seek those things. Seek after God and put him first. The third thing you can do after you've thought about your thinking or analyzed your thinking, your anger, is to transform your anger. And this is where we're kind of bring this home today. This has to happen in you. This is how you take a message that is from the pulpit, from someone who has learned about anger and is trying to describe what he's learned. How do you take that into your own life and make it produce and transform your life? Well, to transform your anger, we have to come face to face with our anger toward God. Say, I'm not angry toward God. I love God. Well, the proof that we are mad at God is this, is that when he became human, we got angry about it. We got angry, and we used our angry hands on him, and he absorbed our disordered anger and said, Father, forgive them. We took it out on Jesus. Our anger was directed at him. And he took not only our undeserved anger, but also the cup. If you look in the Old Testament, the cup represented the wrath and the punishment of God. And instead of it being poured out on all people, he took it upon himself. And he took all the wickedness, all the godlessness, and he took it upon himself, every ounce of anger that we deserve. And he said, forgive them. They do not know what they are doing. I think if this is the ultimate example of loving the sinner and hating the sin, this surgical strike that he does and making sure that he attacks the problem of sin and death. whatever was separating him from his object of love for you and for me. I think if we allow that to sink deep within us of how much that he loved us, even though we were angry at him, even though we crucified him, even though when they spit at him, we might as well be spitting at him. All the sins that we did was in anger toward God, and we killed God. Now, before you try to get yourself off the hook, because I think that this is something about us as humans that's not a good thing, and that we rationalize things. No, you were a participant in that. It wasn't just the collective, all humanity did this. You did that. And every time you sin, you do that. That's what you did to Jesus. And so for us, we have to own that. We have to come to him, because all the things that we get angry about others, if we really think about it, we've done all that to Jesus himself. And how did he respond to us? Well, we deserved an angry response, right? We deserved all God's wrath. He could have just obliterated everybody with his Cyclops laser vision, all right? But he didn't. Instead, he died. He said, forgive them. They know not what they do. And he died. He took it upon himself. And I think in some ways, like anger, even though there is good parts of it, a lot of times it creates a lot of sin, a lot of destruction around us. And we say things we don't mean. We hold on to things we should let go of. We don't forgive. And all of a sudden, what it does is it puts us back in that position where we're at the cross and we're angry at God. And why did you do this? Why did you allow this to happen? I hate you, God. And you spit on him. And that's where it does. It puts you in a very personal position where you're with Jesus, and that's what you're doing. And so before we feel justified in our anger and we start lashing out on everybody, to transform your anger, you need to realize it's first of all toward God. And you bring that towards God, and you realize that his love covers over a multitude of wrongs. Now, taking this into our lives will heal this level 3 anger where it's between you and God, where you have these idols that you've put at the top of your life that you've been seeking, you've been putting in front of God, and all of a sudden you say, no more, my God. I boast no more. I laid them all down at your feet. And you receive instead his love, his forgiveness. And that, once you've received it, flows to others. We've heard in, I think the Lord's Prayer says this, or after he gets done with the Lord's Prayer, he talks about forgiveness. He says, if you don't forgive others, the Father can't forgive you. Now, if you've thought about that, you may have thought it theologically, like, well, God can't forgive sin unless they forgive others. It's not that God can't, it's that it doesn't happen like that. You got to receive in order to give and demonstrate to others. So for you to demonstrate forgiveness towards others, it proves that you have received forgiveness from God, because it's reached such a deep level that no matter how they've wronged you, you're able to offer forgiveness. Forget who the person was that they committed really horrendous crimes, shot a bunch of people in a church, and they were in a judge or a courtroom, and the mother of one of the victims testified that, I know what you did was wrong, and I'm mad at you and all this, but I forgive you. And there's been many instances in courtrooms where people have been able to demonstrate that forgiveness and extend it to other people. Why do they do that? And the media even talks about, why did they do that? And some are like, yeah, it's because they're good people, because they're Christians, all that. That's like not human. That's superhuman. That's supernatural to be able to extend that kind of forgiveness to others, where we should be angry. We want to lash out at them. But instead, we choose to forgive them and choose to love them. And this is the transformation of our anger. This is like, I've been talking about kind of when you're angry, how to pump the brakes is to understand it, but also to transform your anger. If you're an angry person, you need a deep, deep work in your heart, because God can transform that in you, and he does. The last verse I want to give us, and I'm going to have the worship team come up. We're going to go into a couple songs of worship, and it's this. Romans 5:8 says, but God demonstrates his own love for us in this: while we were still sinners, Christ died for us. even before he could get the guarantee that you were going to make a right choice, you were going to forgive, he decided to give his life for us. And if you've received that forgiveness, we freely give that to others. Will you bow your heads with me as we close? Now, there's a couple things that we can do to take this message a little deeper, a little further. And that's for you to first admit your anger. Now, this can be to yourself, to God, just quietly. But if you have something that really is taking up too much space, and it's a problem, and you see it now, just admit it. Admit it to God, admit it to yourself. Yes, I am holding on to my anger. Second thing you can do is to confess your sin. If your anger has caused sin, you've done harm, broken relationships, it's kept you from loving people that you need to love, confess that. The Bible says if you confess to one another your sins, you'll be cleansed of all unrighteousness. Those are part of the Christian life, is to confess to others. That's something to take from this message, is to confess those things that are on your heart. And then finally, to transform your anger with love. And that's what we're going to go into worship with, is that we need to receive the love of God. We need a more complete vision of that, a more complete gift of what that love has done for us, so that then we can extend that love to others, that we can develop slow anger to pump the brakes on anger. Heavenly Father, we just thank you for this time together, and I know that the Holy Spirit is working, and God, you are bringing up stuff that we need to admit. God, there's stuff that we need to confess, and God, that you do want to transform our hearts and make us into a people that are slow to anger, abounding in love, because that's what you're like. Pray during our worship time that you'd meet us here as we sing. Let us reflect on the Proverbs that we've read, and God, to begin to go deeper with this message by going to you. We thank you for this time. In Jesus' name, amen. I invite you to stand up. You're welcome to create the space here at the altar, but we're going to end our time together with just putting our attention on God and pouring our hearts to Him.